morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Maria Tranquilli, and I'm a program manager at NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. For those of you who may not know, the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center is a nonprofit dedicated to enabling entrepreneurs from all over the world to realize their maximum potentials and grow. We will open up for Q&A at the end of this event. Please submit your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation. And none of what we do could be possible without all of the amazing support from our sponsors. We are so humbled by their contributions. During these unique times, we're very curious about sentiment among our entrepreneurs and our community. We'd like to start by taking a few polls to let us know how you're feeling about your business right now. How are you currently feeling? Fearful, anxious? Are you surviving or optimistic? Please let us know. Thank you all. It looks like we're at 63% optimistic today. We have a second poll. What type of entrepreneur are you? Are you an entrepreneur that's currently in business? Are you an aspiring entrepreneur? Or perhaps you hold a different position in your company? Thank you all. It looks like we have a lot of entrepreneurs in business in the audience today. And our final poll, what is keeping you up at night? Is it finance, sales, or marketing? Is it scaling, pivoting, your team, or surviving? Please let us know. Thank you all so much for contributing. It looks like sales is what is keeping us up at night, which is really quite perfect for everything we're about to learn during this Learn-In today. So without any further delay, please join me in giving a warm welcome to our speaker, Barbara Weaver-Smith, founder and CEO of Whale Hunters. Barbara, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Maria. I'm delighted to be here and especially to talk about one of my favorite topics in sales. I'm glad that's what people are thinking about. So let me share my screen here and get ready. Are you seeing that now? No, you're not yet, are you?
Not yet.
Okay, hang on here. I'll take another minute to do this properly. Turning it into a slideshow. Does that do it now?
Yes, we can see it now, Barbara. Perfect.
Okay, so this is one of my favorite sales topics, and I think it's very timely right now because so many companies are slowing down on their sales. And for those of you who are in the selling mode, it may be harder to reach people and they may be putting off their decision making. So I hope you'll find this timely. What I have found over years of working with entrepreneurs and small companies and growing companies is that it's a little bit difficult to do business with bigger companies and to compete against bigger companies. And so we want to talk about why would a big company want to do business with you? What do you have to learn to do business with big companies? And especially, how can you compete with big companies for business? When you think about big companies and small companies working together, who has the advantage? Big companies working with other big companies or big companies working with small companies? When big companies choose to work with other big companies, when I talk about the big companies as buyers, of course, we know that these days there are at least 6 to 7 or maybe more buyers that are taking part in a decision-making process. And they very often choose another big company for all of these reasons, primarily because they think alike, they act alike, and their businesses are very similar in the way their processes work, for example, their brand and reputation. Big companies are a safe choice for them. However, they often choose a small company because, as you know, you provide all the things that really differentiate you. You're more innovative, you're flexible, you can go to market faster, and especially you give them personal attention and lots of control. When you wake up in the morning, you are thinking about your customers, whereas when big company leaders wake up in the morning, they're thinking about their shareholders, their stockholders. So you have a great deal to offer. But here's the trick. They will not buy the advantages you offer unless you can conquer their fears. Although you may be afraid of a big company, the truth is that big companies are much, much more afraid of you. So that's what I really want to talk about this morning, the fear versus the advantage. There was a great book that was written about 2009, and it's called Mapping the BUYERSPHERE. And Google was one of the big investors in this book, along with several other companies. Some of them are now under different ownership and under different names, but Google was a big one. And this was a very big research project. And it's just as true today. You can still get this book on Amazon.com. called Mapping the BUYERSPHERE. And what they found is that overwhelmingly, B2B buying decisions are driven by the emotion of fear, and that the more you understand personal risk in that buying decision, the better you understand what is really happening. So it's very common for an entrepreneur, the technology people, for those of you who sell technology products, whatever you sell, you get very enamored with your solution, and you want to demonstrate to your buyers that you have the newest, the best new thing, the very best solution that you can possibly offer. But what they are looking for is the safest, most risk-free solution that will work. Sometimes they're looking for a solution that is so safe that they prefer to do nothing rather than take a chance. So I'm sure you've had the experience, the painful experience of their decision to let their inside team do something instead of buying an external solution, or making the decision to live with the pain they have, no matter how bad it is, rather than risking doing something else. Big company buyers fear things that kind of fall into 4 categories. And not every buyer has the same kind of fears. They're also not going to tell you necessarily what they're afraid of. They're just going to harbor those fears. Some of them are even possibly unconscious fears that they're not aware that these fears are guiding their behavior. So it's your job to understand that these fears are very much playing a role in the decision. So you're the one, your company, your salespeople, you yourself need to understand that these fears are always there, and pay attention to who might be experiencing them at what point in the buying cycle. They're afraid of change. Any kind of change, whatever causes them to change, is something they would rather avoid. They're afraid of conflict. By conflict, I mean any kind of conflict internally, between people who see the decision differently, or conflict with their current clients, or conflict with their current suppliers, conflict with other departments, conflict with their IT department or with their legal department. So anything that's going to cause conflict, they want to avoid. They're afraid of more work. Now here's how that happens. If you get pushback sometimes because you're moving into a client who's in an industry that you haven't worked in before. This happens all the time to young companies. They always want someone who's experienced in their industry, and how hard it is to get traction in a new industry, even though it's almost just like the other industries that you've worked on. The buyers don't see it that way. They believe that they're going to have to pay money or take time to teach you how their industry works. They also are afraid that they're going to have to take time and spend money to teach you how they operate, especially if they're big and you are small. So they have a tremendous fear, the individual people, of having to do more work if they choose you, especially if you're unknown or you come from a place that they don't know about. They have lots of reasons to be afraid of more work. And the fourth and most important fear that they have, they're afraid of making a mistake. They're afraid that you will fail. And if you fail, it will be proven that they made a terrible mistake and they will be in big trouble. So, I'm sorry, I'm getting in the wrong place here. There, sorry, went too fast. So, in a small company, you often have the motto of failing fast. And so failure is in some ways kind of rewarded because you learn so much from failure. In a big company, there's no such thing as failing fast or failing in any kind of capacity. If you fail, you're in trouble. So they can't afford the risk of failing. If they choose a big, well-known company to buy from and the project goes south, at least they don't get blamed because it was a rational decision, presumably, to pick that company. If they pick a smaller, unknown or less known company, it's perceived as a risky decision. And if they were in on it, they can really face reprisals if it doesn't go well. So they have a lot of risk at stake by choosing you. So here are some examples, the fear of change. If you bring a new approach, if you have new technologies or tools, if you're bringing new people that they don't know that they have to deal with, those are all things that they're afraid of. They're afraid of their immediate colleagues that might disagree on the decision. There might be another department that disagrees. There might be some important group that may stonewall it. There's more work. They have to teach you how to do things their way. They have to teach you their industry. They have to spend more time with you in order to do the job. And fear of making a mistake. If you fail, they'll be blamed. They could spend a whole bunch of money, not get what they need, or they would prefer to have the money and do the job themselves internally. Depending on what it is you sell, that could be a big fear. So what I like to talk about is fear busters. These are things that you can prepare ahead of time and have as part of your sales and marketing repertoire that will preempt their fears and alleviate their fears so that they can really appreciate your advantages. So what I want to explain to you is what we use at the Whale Hunters is an exercise, a team exercise to, first of all, figure out what are the things that they're most likely to fear about our company and what can we invent as fear busters to preempt them. So I'm just illustrating here kind of a worksheet. All you need to do have is the flip chart and sticky notes and get these things down, but this is just a simple chart where you would record what is it that your team thinks fears about you that a company might have in the categories of change, conflict, more work, and failure or mistake. Get your team involved, and not even necessarily only your own team, but your advisors, investors, members of a mastermind group, anybody else that you think could help you. Even customers might be willing to help you with this. It's a great activity because people that you've already sold to might be willing to share what are the things that concerned them or things they were afraid of before they made the decision. Get people together and brainstorm. What are they afraid of? Not necessarily things they say, although sometimes you will have heard things that they're afraid of, but sometimes you haven't heard them. You have to imagine. And here are some brainstorming hints. Are you located someplace that they may not have heard of? Have you been in business for a long time, or maybe you're very new? How fast are you growing? That kind of scares them. If you're growing really fast, do you have enough cash? Do you have a lot of employees? Are you hiring lots of new people all the time? Are you using a lot of contract help? Do you have any big customers already, or would they be the first one? Or would you do a deal with them that's so big they're going to be a big part of your revenue? That frightens them too. Some companies, in fact, have internal rules that they will not do a deal that would make them like more than 25 or 35% of your total revenue. What are your credentials? What are your resources? Do you have enough cash flow to ramp this up? And here's a big one. Can you wait a long time for payment? Because big companies, you may know if you're already dealing with big companies, they are notoriously slow to pay, and that's on purpose. But the people that you are dealing with are not the ones that are going to be making the payments, and they understand that their payables department is pretty slow. And do they have a union? Do they have people that you'll need to be dealing with after the sale that are not necessarily going to be on board with it? These are all kinds of things that might create a fear on their side. So when you get a good list of fears from your brainstorming, figure out which ones you think would be the most significant and pull those out. And then work on fear busters. Seek the biggest fears, get consensus on the most important fears, and focus on those. Now, as you're doing this, beware of any kind of fears that make yourself look small. And I would say at this point, do a review of your sales and marketing collateral and your website, and make sure that you don't have anything on there that I would put it in the category of cute. So if you have any kind of cute stuff on your website, like cute bios that talk about what pets you have, or what movies you prefer, or if you have any cute pictures of all of your team on some kind of outing, or everybody jumping up in the air, anything that's cute, this is a good time to redo that part of your website and make it look uber professional. Then when you've got some big customers, you can go back to the more casual look, but this is a good time to not be casual, to be super professional, because some of those things make you look small because they're not typical of the way big company websites look. So look at the websites of your prospects and try to make yours look as much like that as you can. That's one piece of advice I have. That's a tip. So now you're going to build your fear buster tools. And what do I mean by tools? Fear busters are things that are tangible and specific and brief. So tangible is a real key here. A lot of people mix these up with things they can talk about. So I know you can talk about them, but in order to be really useful, they need to be tangible, like actual documents or digital assets or people, for example. So what do great fear busters look like? Graphs and charts are wonderful fear busters. Big companies love anything that you can do with numbers to crunch them down into one little slide that will tell them the whole story. That's one of the things that's common in big companies. So they love any kind of representation of numbers like that. Your website is important. As I mentioned, it should look really, really professional and crisp. Explainer videos are good, and testimonials are really important as fear busters. Process diagrams, any kind of process flow. In fact, in small companies, you know how to do things. Everything you do, you know how to do, or somebody in your company knows how to do, but very often it's not written down anywhere. So when you're getting ready to work with a big company or sell to a big company, this is the time to bring some discipline to the processes you have. And so when you get these processes drawn up or written down or put into some kind of chart format, presenting those things through your sales process really helps them to feel that you do business like they do, because big companies are extremely process driven. Even if they don't follow their processes, they have them. And they're written up in different places. They might be standard operating procedures, for example, SOPs, that big companies rely on to get things done. Pictures are important, and team bios and pictures of, if you work in a great building, if you happen to own your building, or if you're working in a prominent incubator or accelerator, anything like that that brings cachet to where you work, or the location, or if you have a university affiliation, anything like that that's prominent, that's good. That's a good fear buster. They bring credibility to you. White papers are great. Case studies are even better. Anything like that that brings more cachet is a good fear buster. I mentioned your website already. So here are some specific examples. I live in Scottsdale, Arizona, and we're very close to Tempe, which is where the Arizona State University is located there. But lots of people, certainly East Coast people, are not familiar with Tempe, Arizona. So it's better if your company is in Tempe, it's better to say you're in Phoenix. Or if you're in a very small town in one of the Midwest states, then it's better to, get an office location, just an address and a phone number from Regis or one of the temp office places in a bigger city, or even in a bigger state, so that you don't have that problem. If you don't know their industry, testimonials, process maps are helpful. If they're worried about your cash flow, very often we've used a letter from your banker that says, if this company gets this deal, this is the kind of cash flow or the line of credit that we're going to guarantee. Line of credit also is good to make sure that you can deal with waiting for payments. If they want to know about your employees, you can give them a chart about your employees and your contractors and how you manage costs. If you have had any big customers, you want to make that clear to them. So you want to look through all the fears and try to figure out, what do you have or what do you need that would help to alleviate their fears about you, and be very creative about this, because you may not have a lot of things to do this. But the point I'm trying to make is, if you have fear busters and you bring them out ahead of being asked, or bring them out deliberately when people really don't want to ask you about it, or they're choosing not to ask you, it gives you a whole lot of credibility, because you're choosing to do it by saying, well, I know typically customers worry about X, Y, and Z, and that's why we're offering this to you now. There's an example of a worksheet. Again, it's very simple chart. On the one column, write down the fears, and in the middle, write an example of what you're going to offer them as a fear buster. And then I also use a little code to rate your fear buster, a plus, a minus, or a 0. And I'm going to come back to that, but it's just to rate it. Do you have a good one already? That's a plus. Do you have one already that needs work? That's a minus. And if you don't have one at all, that's a 0. There's my rating system, a plus, a 0, or a minus, just to help you keep track of where you really are in the fear buster system. So one of the things people worry about is, where are they going to get the time and the resources to create these marketing materials that are necessary in order to build this collection of important resources? So I have some suggestions about that. One is, you can gather the existing fear busters and prioritize which ones are needed soonest. If you have things that you need to improve upon, maybe you have some materials, but you don't have them in all the right formats. And so you want to work on those first and get them in new formats or different formats to improve upon them. Now, if you have a good internal marketing team, they can work on that, but lots of young companies don't have much in the way of marketing. So you can outsource the responsibility for that, for producing new fear busters. I work a lot with people from Fiverr, and I've worked with people from Upwork and with guru.com. And I get a lot of marketing work done that way as I need it for my fear busters, and they're good at producing all kinds of things, from websites or web pages and brochures to social media content to video content. And these days, of course, you need video at least as much, if not more, than other kinds of fear buster materials. One of the things I like to recommend is that when you're working with big companies, you're not always talking to the people that are going to make the final buying decision. It's really helpful to provide fear busters in very short tidbits that your contacts or your champion can take up line, like a short video or a short slide deck that they can take to their people that they report to help them understand what it is that you have to offer, whether that's prior to a meeting or in some cases instead of a meeting, because you can't necessarily get that final person, the one who has to say yes to the budget. You're not necessarily going to get them to the table, or you may not get them to the table until the end, and you want to keep them informed all the way along. So that's another good reason to have some very tangible, specific, and brief fear busters that you can spread out among the influencers along the way. So that leads me to the third point on this slide, that you want to introduce these fear busters strategically into your sales process so that the sellers will know when to use them. They're not just to have on your website or to use in your social media. They are to be used strategically during the sales process. I have a great book to recommend to you that deals with what kinds of things people want to know, buyers want to know during the sales process. And that's a book by Lisa Dennis, and it's called Value Propositions That Sell. You can get it in a lot of places, but I'll just recommend you look on Amazon.com because I know it's there. Value Propositions That Sell by Lisa Dennis. And Lisa did a great piece of research about what buyers are looking for at different stages of their buying process. And what she found was that they have different concerns early, middle, and late in the buyer's process, in the buyer's journey, as she called it. And that will give you some good ideas of what kind of fear busters might work best at which places in your buyer's journey. You can add a lot of value to your value proposition with fear busters content. Fear busters resonate with your customers, so you can use them preemptively. You can use them in many formats and many settings, determine where each piece fits best, and train your sales team to use them appropriately. Sync your sales process with your customer journey by using fear busters. You can use them in emails, you can use them in blog posts, and convert them as much as possible into short videos. So every fear buster can exist in a number of different formats. They don't have to just be a static thing. What kind of outcomes can you achieve by creating fear busters and paying attention to the whale's fears about you? And I use the term whale because I'm a whale hunter. My company is the Whale Hunters. But what I mean by that, a whale to me is a customer that can give you a big deal, a deal that may be 10 to 20 times the size of your current average deal. But fear busters are important for any kind of client. They just get more and more important as you work up market into bigger clientele. And they're especially important today because bigger customers are going to be coming down market and competing against you even for your smaller deals, because markets in some cases are in decline right now. They're contracting. So you can be certain you're going to face bigger competitors no matter where you are situated in the market. So fear busters help you retain your big customers. They help you gain new large accounts, and they always help you win against big competitors. Keeping in mind that small companies have the real advantage against big competitors, but that the big companies will not buy your advantage unless you can preempt and alleviate their fears. Before we get into questions, I want to invite you to join the Whale Hunters. We are producing the Big Growth Summit, August 25th and 26th. It's a virtual summit, and it's for entrepreneurs and their leadership teams who are ready to go beyond survival mode. We have a special discount, a $50 discount for NASDAQ guests. You can use the coupon NASDAQ 50. You can go to biggrowthsummit.com. I think that they have it in the chat, and I know that it's going to come out on the follow-up email. So thank you for listening to my presentation, and I think, Maria, we're going to go into Q&A now. So I'm going to stop this screen share.
Perfect, Barbara.
And I will be happy to take any questions that people have.
Wonderful. So hold on one moment.
Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. Barbara, thank you so much. That was incredible. So we have, absolutely, we have a few questions, and I want to invite the audience right now. Please submit your questions either in the chat or the Q&A function, and or if you feel brave at this moment, you are invited to share your voice. So you can raise your hand and we would be happy to take your question live. So that being said, question number one, Barbara, you just mentioned that that small companies actually have an advantage over larger companies. And the question would be, can you expand on that a little bit? What leverage or what advantage do the small companies have over those larger companies?
Yeah, I think the advantage, the small companies have several advantages. Typically, you are more innovative because you can move faster than big companies can. It's very hard for them to change, and so small companies are more agile. You get to market faster. You can do things so much faster than bigger competitors can do. So especially now in a time of chaos, if companies need something new, they need it fast, they're going to get it from a small company. They're not likely to get it from a big company. The second real advantage you have is they get undivided attention from a small company. They get high level attention that they don't get from a big company typically. And so that's a big selling point. Another advantage for small companies is that typically they get to meet the people who actually do the work. And you can use that to your advantage if you help your SMEs learn how to be part of the selling process with you. That's one of the big things that the Whale Hunters teach Use your subject matter experts, get them involved with your sales team in the selling process so you can put them forward as fear busters. Because a lot of big companies have a sales team and the delivery team is way over here. So the people who are going to work with your company never get to meet any of the people that are actually going to do the work. And so they worry, are we going to get an A team or a B team or a C team? And a small company can honestly say, we only have an A team and here they are. You can meet them, you can shake their hand, you can have lunch with them. So those are just 3 examples of real advantages that small companies have. So if you can mitigate the perceived disadvantages, you really can have a big impact. But the key is you have to mitigate the perceived disadvantages, because I don't believe you really have any disadvantages, but the buyers will think you have disadvantages. So that's why the fear busters are so important.
Excellent. Thank you, Barbara. All right, we have another question. How might an entrepreneur, early stage founder, find the person within the company to speak to? How do we know we're speaking to the right person to sell to within this larger company?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, first of all, I'm a big believer in doing as much research as you possibly can before you ever go to talk to anybody. So you need to do your homework. If it's a public company, you need to get their SEC filing and read the management letter that's part of that. And that will give you some information about key employees. That will also give you information about what their company strategy is. Armed with that information, you can usually find some kind of dossier online about them that will get you started and get you a list of upper level employees. Then take that to LinkedIn and start looking up on LinkedIn the people who exist at the level of business or in the part of the business that you want to reach. Now, the other thing is there's no one specific person that you have to get to know. So you can have a list of maybe 10 people that you'd like to meet. And there used to be a perception that you could only talk to one person because you might irritate the other people, but that's a ridiculous thing to worry about now. Start to try to make relationships with multiple people. I'm also a big believer when you're going into a big company, try everything you can to get a warm introduction. So everybody you know, let them know, I want to meet somebody in such and such a company. Let your neighbors know, let your family know. Let this be known on LinkedIn. Tell everybody you know, all your other customers, can you help me? Introduce me to somebody at this company. Then meet 1 or 2 people. And as soon as you get an audience with one person and you get an inkling that there's any kind of interest, ask them to introduce you to anyone else who would be affected by this project. That's also how you can tell if you're making progress on a deal. We call this the buyer's table. This is all the influencers of a deal, of which, as I said, there's going to be at least 6 and maybe 12 or 13, depending on the size of the deal. And so that's how you can tell if you're beginning to meet anyone or any group of people who are willing to be a champion for you. So anytime they are willing to bring other people to the table, you know you're making progress. And you just work your way through. If you have a marketing team, that's the other thing that your marketing team should be doing for you. That's why sales and marketing have to be joined at hip. You do this together. Tell them this is the company that we're interested in. Help me find people. Send them marketing information, direct things in that direction so they can get to know you.
Such great strategies, Barbara. Okay, so we have a question that seems to be a follow-up to that last topic. Can you talk a little bit about the number of buyers involved in a big company buying process and how to influence each one up to the economic buyer?
Okay, well, I mentioned that the research today is saying somewhere between 6.5 people to 11 or 12 people, depending on the complexity of your sale. Now, in the business that I'm in, I'm working with small companies like yours who have a complex sale to a big company. So in a complex sale, there are usually more than 6. There would be 8, 10, 12 people, and that would include, legal people, procurement people, whoever the end users are. Almost always technology people are involved, even if it's not a tech project, and training people, HR people, lots of people who weigh in. And of course, all the end users, and that might extend. If you have an enterprise software, for example, then it's like the whole shooting match. Somebody from almost every part of the organization. So you need to work your way through. Now, the way you discover what they're interested in, one way is, some of that is predictable according to their position in the organization. And the more you know about the organizational strategy, you can always talk to somebody. If you have an idea of what their organizational strategy is, their strategic plan, when you go in, you can say, so this is my understanding of your company's strategic plan. So what part of that are you responsible for? That's always a great question to ask, because they love that you've paid attention. And then you can get them talking about what they're interested in. And then the other thing is to, as you get to know them, you can make judgments about their own personality, their interests. Are they an introvert or an extrovert? And how are they interacting with you? And you can get your own subject matter experts matched up with the people who are their counterparts, their peers, which is why you want to have multiple people from your side who are able to help with this. And that economic buyer, in our lingo, we call that the polar bear. It's hard to get to that person. That person actually may be hibernating. You may never get to actually meet them, but you need to keep meeting people and keep convening. The more that you can get the people that you do know, bringing other people to the table and convening or introducing you, the better your chances are to get to know the whole team and get a positive decision.
Thank you, Barbara, so much. Okay, so we have a question. For early stage founders, what would you recommend that are the best B2B sales strategies coming out of COVID? What for the new normal?
Oh, that's a great question. The most important strategy coming out of COVID is always a good strategy, but it's even more important now. Your clients, your customers, your prospects are in just as much trouble as you are. Everybody needs help. So the best thing you can do is ask them, how can I help you? What can I do for you? What are you trying to accomplish? Of course, we have to do this all virtually. So get to be as good as you can be in your virtual communications. Don't waste any time on virtual. Make sure that you have good technology and that you become skilled in using it, so that you're not wasting their time. Bring them new information. Everybody is more isolated than ever before. So do your research. Research is hard to come by right now, research that's up to date. So any up-to-date research that you can find or that you can, locate that has to do with their industry or what's going on relevant to them, that you can start a conversation with, will be very valuable. Or anything that's going on in another industry or with another customer you have that might be relevant would be very appreciated now. So just think about how can you add value, whether you're going to get paid for it or not. Just be as useful as you can be right now to your prospects, and they will value you for that.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, we have a question about cold sales. I'm going to rephrase the question a little bit, but what do you think about cold sales? Is this something that we should be doing? Should we be going back to past customers and speaking to them?
Well, cold sales do work. They work in different ways. I think they're less effective with big, complex sales. So it's not something that I practice a lot with my customers, but cold sales if it's to a past customer, I don't really consider that a cold sale. So maybe that's a little bit different in terminology. I don't think you should be afraid to contact anyone, but what you need to think about is what are you going to say when you get them on the phone? You have to have something that they need, whether it's information or advice or an offer of some kind of value to add right away. They're not going to respond to just, I need something from you. They're just not going to respond to that. That's one reason that what we decided to do for our prospects and customers was to put together this big growth summit. There, I did it, I plugged it again. But really, we did that because we perceived a need and we decided that's what we could do. We could put that out there. So I think every company needs to think about what can you do just to serve your customers and prospects and try to provide for them something that they need. And they will appreciate that and they'll remember you even if they can't buy something now. So if you're going to make a cold call, you have to think about what could they possibly need from you now. They're not going to be very responsive to just, I need 10 minutes of your time. They're going to want to know why. And I also think what's really working now is a video call. So, the services like OneMob and BombBomb. I happen to use OneMob myself. BombBomb's another alternative, but where you can send a video email instead of necessarily a cold phone call, kind of warms people up. I like that strategy.
Wonderful, Barbara. I love that. Let's see. And a quick plug for everyone. So we have a survey that is in the chat. As you listen to the next few minutes of our Q&A, please take just 2 minutes to fill out that survey. It helps Barbara and it helps the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center deliver programs that are specifically for you by your request. All right, Barbara, so we have some other questions here.
Okay.
There's a follow-up from a previous question.
All right.
If we can reach the CEO of the big company and they say they are interested in buying, should we consider that a yes, or do we need to convince all the other influencers within the buying process?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, you have to convince everybody because the CEO is not going to buy it if everybody else is against it. They don't want that kind of hassle and they don't need that kind of hassle. In fact, it's very unlikely that a CEO is going to tell you that they want it. They're going to refer you to some people that they want to explore it. And so they will get other people involved.
Great. Okay. We have another question. What would be your recommendation around sources for making sure we have a professional image? I think this is citing your earlier reference to not look small, to look large.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I will make you an offer. If you want me to look at your website, I'm always happy to do that. So that's one thing you can do. Send me a link to your website, barbara@thewhalehunters.com, and I'd be glad to take a quick look at it and send you back my impression. The other thing you can do is ask a couple of customers to look at it, ask a few advisors to look at it, specifically looking for those things that I mentioned. Is there anything on here that in your judgment doesn't look as professional as a big company website would look?
Wonderful. Okay, let's see. That was a big offer, Barbara. You're about to get a lot of emails.
I hope I do. Bring it on.
Wonderful. Okay, next question. And just to let everyone know, we have probably about 4 to 5 more minutes. So if you have a question, please let us know in either the chat or the Q&A function, or you can raise your hand and we would be happy to bring you in. let's see, there are so many stakeholders in a big company. What is a structured and efficient way to tackle all of the stakeholders and influencers to get the deal at a big company? What might you suggest?
That you not take a drink while you're right in the middle of doing your Q&A. Excuse me.
No problem.
Well, I hope you're using a CRM, because that's one way that you can keep track. But you can also make yourself a little grid. You know the titles of the people. I think you should know the titles of the people that you need to involve, who are going to be using your product, and then brainstorm the titles of the other people that ought to be involved. Or when you talk first to the people who are most likely to be buying from you, ask them the question, who else is going to be affected by your purchase, or who else is going to be involved? They don't necessarily know. See, these people that we're talking about as the buyer's table or the influencers, they don't normally work together. They're only coming together to make a purchase. They're not a formal buying team. They don't do this routinely. They don't necessarily know each other. So your job as a seller is to help them think through, who else should I bring to the table? And if you learn to do that well, you can be enormously helpful to them as well. So you need to have a method to keep track of it for yourself. And your CRM is a great way to do that. But you can also just do it kind of on a table or something, a grid, to kind of track the relationships. But a lot of your CRMs help you to do that.
Great question. Okay, let's see. So Barbara's email is now in the chat. For everyone that is asking, lots of questions, Barbara, be ready for those emails. And again, if everyone fill out that type form, that survey, we would absolutely love to hear from you. Both Barbara and myself, we would love to see what your feedback is. And I would say, Barbara, in our last few minutes, I just want to check the Q&A. Great. Okay. What is the best way for early startups to develop good business practices? Is there a book or recommendation that you might have for this?
Oh, gee, that's a great question. A book for that. I don't know. There's so many. Let me think about that, and I'll send it to you, Maria, and you can send it out.
Wonderful. That sounds great.
I have it right on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah, that actually works. So, and for everyone still listening, everyone in attendance that's live will receive a follow-up resources email that will link to this replay. It will link to the survey and any other resources that Barbara has referred to today, which is actually really fantastic for all of us. So you wouldn't have missed anything. You can view Barbara's incredible slides again. And Barbara, I would ask, I think as our final question for today, what advice might you leave, a few tips or strategies for early stage founders? I know in our community, we have a lot of early stage founders and entrepreneurs. So your parting words of wisdom, I think would be a great way to end us off.
Behave like you're bigger than you are. Be as professional as you can be. If you're not in a mastermind group, create one or find one. Find a few people that you can kick ideas around with, and don't be afraid, because there are people out there who want to help you and want your product and your service. Make sure you have a good banker, a good lawyer, and a good accountant, and make them part of your team. They can be enormously helpful in the sales process, especially not only giving you good advice, but occasionally being at a face-to-face meeting with your client. If you invest in really good advisors early on, that was one of the things I did that paid off really, really big time for me. It made me always look professional. One last thing is, whatever it is that you're selling, make it look like a process so that you can get paid from the beginning. That's advice I learned from the strategic coach, Dan Sullivan, who has taught me many, many things over the years, but that was the best one. That's why the Whale Hunters is a process. And if you can make it look like a process and get a visual image of it, it will pay enormous dividends in your selling and your delivery.
Oh, so incredible, Barbara. Thank you so, so much for taking the time to speak to this community, to share your wisdom and insights, and to set such a great overview and really dive into some tactical pieces of information for our community. On behalf of the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center and everyone in attendance today, we sincerely thank you for joining us. It has been a pleasure.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Anytime, Maria. I'm happy to do it.
Thank you so much, Barbara. And
Thank
for
you.
all of you still listening, again, please fill out our survey. And we have a few great programs coming up that I would love to share with you. Number one, first and foremost, as Barbara mentioned, one of the greatest things you can do for you and your business is to join a mastermind. And the equivalent of that within NASDAQ is our Circles program. It is specifically a mentorship program for early stage founders and really entrepreneurs and founders within our community. And we are doing this consistently throughout the year. It's a really fun and great program. We would love to have you. So you can find that on our website, find me on LinkedIn, or email us about that. I would be happy to share more information about it. I think actually a few participants right now have been through our Circles program, which I'm so grateful for. And then upcoming, we have this coming Thursday, Resilience for Entrepreneurs, Circles of Care with Jamie Greenwood, a really fantastic way to up your wellness in this current situation. And then in a few weeks, we actually have Fine-Tuning Your Marketing to Emerge from COVID with Christine Alamany. She is an incredible marketing strategist and specialist that will be sharing some really interesting step-by-step processes. So again, thank you all so much for joining us today. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we look forward to seeing you again. Bye-bye now.